Captain Rebecca Becky Martinez had heard every joke in the book. At 32, she was one of only 3 female pilots at Randolph Air Force Base in Texas, and the men never let her forget it. Standing barely 5'4" with dark hair, pulled back in regulation style, she looked nothing like the Hollywood version of a military hero. But behind her calm brown eyes lay 15 years of military service and over 3,000 flight hours. "Hey Martinez, you sure you can reach the pedals in that bird?" Lieutenant Jake Morrison called out as Becky walked toward the flight line that Tuesday morning. His buddies erupted in laughter, slapping each other on the back like they'd just heard the world's funniest joke. Becky kept walking without turning around. She'd learned long ago that responding only encouraged them. Besides, she had more important things on her mind. Today marked her final evaluation, flight before being considered for promotion to major. After 12 years of proving herself over and over, this was her chance to finally get the respect she'd earned. The base commander, Colonel Robert Hayes, had made it clear he wasn't thrilled about having women in combat roles. He was old-school military, the kind of man who believed a woman's place was behind a desk, not behind the controls of a fighter jet. During their last meeting, he'd actually said, "Martinez, I hope you understand the responsibility that comes with rank. We can't have any emotional decisions affecting mission success." The implication was clear. Women were too emotional for real leadership. Becky's fellow pilots weren't much better. They questioned every decision she made, her judgment, and worst of all, they did it in front of the younger airmen. She'd watched promising female cadets transfer out after months of harassment and mockery. It broke her heart every time. "I don't know why she even bothers," she overheard Captain Tony Rodriguez saying in the mess hall. "Everyone knows Hayes will never promote her. He's just going through the motions because of regulations. My wife says she should quit and have kids like normal women," added Sergeant Mike Thompson. "Flying jets isn't natural for females. Their brains aren't wired for split-second decisions under pressure." Becky pushed her tray along the food line, pretending she couldn't hear them, but inside, their words stung. Not because she believed them, but because she knew how their attitudes affected other women on base. She'd become the lightning rod for all their prejudices about female soldiers. What they didn't know was that Becky had grown up fighting for everything she'd ever achieved. Raised by a single mother in El Paso after her father died in the Gulf War, she'd learned early that nobody was going to hand her anything. Her mother, Maria Martinez, had worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table and still found time to drive Becky to every baseball game and science fair. "Mia," her mother used to say, "people will always try to tell you what you can't do. Your job is to prove them wrong." Those words had carried Becky through flight school, where instructors openly questioned whether women had the physical strength to handle high-G maneuvers. They'd sustained her through her first deployment, where male pilots forgot to include her in mission briefings, and they gave her strength now. As she prepared for what might be her last chance at advancement, the truth was, Becky was one of the best pilots on base. Her flight scores were consistently in the top 5%. She'd completed 3 combat deployments with distinction. During her last tour in Afghanistan, she'd successfully navigated her damaged aircraft back to base, after taking enemy fire, saving both her life and a multi-million-dollar fighter jet. But none of that seemed to matter. At every performance review, she received comments about her attitude or concerns about her compatibility with traditional unit dynamics. It was military speak for "the boys don't like her." Her only real ally was Master Sergeant Patricia Williams, a 20-year veteran who ran the base communications center. Pat had fought her own battles for respect and understood what Becky was going through. "Don't let them see you sweat," Pat advised during one of their coffee meetings. "They're waiting for you to crack, to give them an excuse to say, 'Women can't handle the pressure.' Stay professional, do your job better than anyone else, and eventually the truth will speak for itself." Becky hoped Pat was right, but some days it felt like an uphill battle with no end in sight. The younger female airmen looked up to her, expecting her to break through the barriers they all faced. The weight of that responsibility was enormous. As she suited up for her evaluation flight that morning, Becky thought about all the women who'd come before her, the pioneers who'd fought for the right to serve in combat roles. She thought about the young women watching her now, wondering if they had a future in the military. She thought about her mother's words about proving people wrong. Today wasn't just about her promotion, it was about opening doors for every woman who'd follow. The morning sky over San Antonio was crystal clear as Captain Martinez completed her pre-flight checklist. Her evaluation was going perfectly. She'd executed every maneuver with precision, communicated clearly with air traffic control, and demonstrated the kind of steady leadership that should have made her promotion automatic. Colonel Hayes was monitoring the flight from the control tower, along with 2 other senior officers who would weigh in on her evaluation. Through her headset, she could hear snippets of their conversation during radio breaks. Her technique is textbook, admitted Major Frank Peterson, the chief flight instructor. I've got to give her that. Technique doesn't mean much when lives are on the line, Colonel Hayes replied. Real leadership is tested under pressure, not during routine flights. Becky bit back her frustration. She'd proven herself under pressure dozens of times, but those incidents seemed to disappear from memory when evaluation time came around. As she banked her F-16 toward the final approach, an urgent voice crackled through her radio. All aircraft, this is San Antonio approach control. We have a civilian aircraft declaring emergency. American Airlines Flight 447, Boeing 737, experiencing total hydraulic failure. Aircraft has 148 souls on board. Becky's blood ran cold. Total hydraulic failure meant the pilots had lost all primary flight controls. Without hydraulics, the massive airliner would be nearly impossible to control. She'd studied such scenarios in flight school. They rarely ended well. American 447 San Antonio approach. The air traffic controller's voice was tense but professional. Say your intentions. The response that came back made everyone in the air and on the ground hold their breath. San Antonio approach. American 447. We've lost all primary controls. Pilots are incapacitated. Repeat. Both pilots are unconscious. This is Flight Attendant Janet Wilson. I don't know how to fly this plane. The radio fell silent for several heartbeats. Becky could imagine the controlled chaos erupting. In air traffic control centers across Texas, a fully loaded passenger jet with no qualified pilot was every controller's nightmare. American 447 came the controller's careful response. Maintain heading and altitude if possible. We're getting help. But Becky knew the truth. At 35,000 feet, with damaged controls and no pilot, Flight 447 had maybe 20 minutes before it would start an uncontrolled descent. Even if they could get another pilot on the radio to talk the flight attendant through landing procedures, the odds of success were virtually zero. That's when she heard Colonel Hayes' voice cut through the emergency frequencies. This is Randolph Base Commander. We have assets in the area. Captain Martinez, what's your fuel status? Becky checked her gauges. Sir, I have 40 minutes of fuel remaining. Return to base immediately, Captain. This is a civilian emergency. We'll let the airlines handle it. For a moment, Becky couldn't believe what she was hearing. There was a plane full of people about to crash, and Hayes was ordering her to land. She thought about the 148 souls on board, families, children, grandparents, all depending on someone, anyone, to help them. Sir, request permission to assist, Becky transmitted. I can get close enough to assess the situation. Negative, Captain, return to base. That's an order. Becky looked out her canopy and spotted the American Airlines 737 in the distance. Even from several miles away, she could see it was in trouble. The aircraft was wallowing through the sky, gaining and losing altitude without hydraulic controls. The pilots, or in this case, the flight attendant, could only use engine thrust to try to control the plane's direction and altitude. It was like trying to steer a car using only the gas pedal. American 447. This is Air Force Captain Martinez, Becky transmitted on the emergency frequency. I'm a military pilot in the area. Can you hear me? Oh, thank God, came the tearful response. Yes, I can hear you. Please, I don't know what to do. The pilots both collapsed. There's something wrong with the oxygen system up here. I grabbed a portable bottle, but I don't know how long it will last. Now Becky understood. The flight crew had been overcome by hypoxia, oxygen deprivation. At that altitude, without proper oxygen, they would have only minutes of useful consciousness before passing out. The flight attendant, Janet, was running on borrowed time. Janet, my name is Becky. I'm going to help you. Okay, first thing you need to get that plane to a lower altitude where you can breathe. Do you see a control yoke in front of the captain's seat? Yes, but it's not moving anything. I've tried pushing and pulling, but nothing happens. That's okay. The hydraulics are out. You're going to have to use the engines to control the plane. It's going to be tricky, but I'll walk you through it. Captain Martinez, Colonel Hayes' angry voice cut through the frequency. You are ordered to return to base immediately. Becky made a decision that would change everything. She switched off her command frequency and focused solely on the emergency channel. She was about to disobey a direct order from her commanding officer, effectively ending her military career. But 148 people were going to die if someone didn't help them. Janet, I'm still here. Don't worry about the other voices on the radio. Just focus on my voice, okay? Okay, Becky. I trust you. Those words hit Becky like a physical blow. This woman, this complete stranger, was putting her life and the lives of 147 other people in Becky's hands. The weight of that responsibility was crushing, but it was also clarifying. This was why she'd become a pilot. Not for medals or promotions or the respect of men who would never see her as an equal. This was for moments like this, when training and skill could mean the difference between life and death. All right, Janet, we're going to do this together. Janet, listen to me carefully, Becky transmitted as she maneuvered her F-16 closer to the stricken airliner. I need you to look at the engine power levers. They should be in the center console between the pilot seats. I see them, Janet. Voice was shaky but determined. They're like big handles. Right. That's right. Those are your only controls now. By adding power to one engine or the other, you can turn the plane. By adding power to both engines, you can climb. By reducing power, you'll descend. Do you understand? Meanwhile, on the command frequency, Colonel Hayes was furious. Martinez, you will return to base this instant or face court-martial. Major Peterson's voice cut in. Sir, she's the only pilot in range. If she doesn't help them, ... That's not our responsibility, Hayes snapped. She's disobeying direct orders. But Becky had already made her choice. As she pulled alongside the massive airliner, she could see Janet through the cockpit windows, a young woman in a flight attendant's uniform, clearly terrified but trying to stay calm. Behind her, Becky caught glimpses of passengers in the cabin, many of them pressed against the windows, watching the military jet that had appeared beside them. Okay, Janet, I can see you now. You're doing great. The first thing we need to do is get this plane to a lower altitude where you can breathe properly. I need you to pull both power levers back slowly, just a little bit. How much? Just an inch or so. Don't jerk them. Nice and smooth. Becky watched as the big jet's nose dipped slightly. The plane began a gradual descent, but it was also starting to roll to the left. Janet, the plane is turning left. Push the right power lever forward just a touch to level the wings. It's so hard to control, Janet said, her voice tight with concentration. I know, but you're doing it. You're actually flying this plane. What Becky didn't tell Janet was how miraculous it was that she was managing to control the aircraft at all. Flying a damaged airliner using only engine power required an almost supernatural feel for the aircraft. Most trained pilots couldn't do it, but somehow this flight attendant was keeping 148 people alive through pure determination and Becky's guidance. As they descended through 20,000 feet, Becky began thinking about the landing. That would be the real challenge. San Antonio International had long runways, but getting a hydraulically compromised 737 lined up and down safely would take a miracle. American 447, this is San Antonio Approach Control, came a new voice. We have emergency equipment standing. By runway 12 left is cleared and ready. Wind is light and variable. Janet, Becky said, they're going to want us to line up for landing soon, but first I need to ask you something important. How are the passengers? Scared but okay. Some of the oxygen masks dropped when we lost pressure, but we're low enough. Now that everyone can breathe, the other flight attendants are keeping everyone calm. What about the pilots? Still unconscious, I think. I think they might be really sick. The oxygen system up here was making a weird smell before it quit working. Carbon monoxide poisoning, Becky realized. The pilots hadn't just been overcome by lack of oxygen, they'd been poisoned by contaminated air from the engine bleed system. It was a rare malfunction, but it meant the pilots wouldn't be waking up anytime soon. All right, Janet, it's going to be just you and me for the landing. Are you ready for this? Do I have a choice? No, but I believe in you. You've kept this plane in the air for 20 minutes using controls you'd never seen before today. That tells me you're stronger than you know. By now, word of the emergency had spread. News helicopters were following at a safe distance. On the ground, fire trucks and ambulances were positioning themselves along the runway. In homes and businesses across San Antonio, people were glued to television screens and radios, following the unfolding drama. At Randolph Air Force Base, Colonel Hayes was facing a room full of officers who were quietly questioning his decision to recall Captain Martinez. Master Sergeant Williams had been monitoring the emergency frequencies and recording everything. Sir, Major Peterson said carefully. Captain Martinez seems to be the only thing standing between that airliner and disaster. She's disobeying orders, Hayes replied, but his voice lacked conviction. She's saving lives, Williams said quietly, from her position at the communications console, and she's doing it better than any pilot I've ever heard. On the emergency frequency, Becky was lining Janet up for the most difficult landing of her life. Okay, Janet, I can see the runway ahead. It looks like a thin gray line, right? I see it. But Becky, we're going so fast. How do I slow down? You can't. Not much anyway. Without flaps or speed brakes, you're going to land fast. But the runway is long enough. Just focus on keeping the plane pointed straight at that runway. I'm scared, I know. I'm scared too. But fear means you're alive, and that's what we're fighting for. Every person on that plane is counting on us. Your colleagues, the passengers, their families. They're all counting on you to be brave for just a few more minutes. As they approached the runway, Becky could see the emergency vehicles lining the taxiways, fire trucks with their lights flashing, ambulances standing by, news crews filming from a safe distance. The whole world was watching now. Janet, you see that runway? That's your target. Keep the wings level. Keep pointing at the center line. When you get close to the ground, and I'll tell you when, pull those power levers all the way back. Okay, Becky, yes, thank you. Whatever happens, thank you for not leaving us. Those words would haunt Becky for the rest of her life. Not leaving them. Such a simple concept, but it captured everything about duty, honor, and what it really meant to serve others. American 447, you're 3 miles from touchdown, the air traffic controller announced, his voice tight with tension. Emergency equipment is in position. Becky could see everything unfolding below like a movie in slow motion. Fire trucks lined both sides of the runway, their red lights painting the asphalt in urgent flashes. Ambulances waited in neat rows. News helicopters hovered, at a safe distance, broadcasting the drama to millions of viewers around the world. Janet, I need you to listen to me very carefully now, Becky transmitted, keeping her F-16 positioned just off the airliner's right wing. In about 60 seconds, you're going to touch down. The plane is going to hit hard and fast. Don't be scared when it bounces. Just keep holding the nose straight with the engines. The ground looks so close already. Janet's voice was tight with fear. That's normal. Big planes always look like they're coming in too fast. You're doing everything right. Just keep the wings level. From her position beside the 737, Becky could see Janet in the cockpit, both hands gripping the power levers, her face a mask of concentration. Behind her, through the cabin windows, Becky caught glimpses of passengers, a mother holding a small child, an elderly man clutching his wife's hand, a businessman with his head bowed in prayer. These weren't just statistics anymore. They were faces, lives, families, and they were all depending on a flight attendant who'd never flown a plane and a female pilot that her own commanding officer had ordered away from the scene. 2 miles from touchdown, 447, the controller announced, looking good. But Becky could see what the controller couldn't. The big airliner was coming in at nearly 200 miles per hour, almost 50 miles per hour faster than normal. Without flaps to create extra lift and drag, Janet had no way to slow down. They were going to hit the runway like a rocket. Janet, when I tell you, pull both power levers all the way back to idle, but not yet. Wait for my command. Okay, oh God, Becky, I can see people on the runway. Those are firefighters and paramedics. They're there to help. Don't worry about them. Just focus on that center line. Down in the tower, air traffic controllers held their breath. On the ground, emergency crews tensed for what was about to unfold. In living rooms across America, families gathered around television screens, watching a drama more gripping than any Hollywood movie. At Randolph Air Force Base, Colonel Hayes stood silent in the control tower, finally understanding the magnitude of what was happening. Master Sergeant Williams had patched the emergency frequency through the base's speakers, so everyone could hear Captain Martinez's calm, professional voice guiding the stricken airliner home. She's been talking that woman down for 40 minutes, Major Peterson said quietly. I don't think I could have done it. Hayes said nothing, but privately he was beginning to realize he'd made a terrible mistake. 1 mile out, Janet. You can see the runway numbers now, right? Yes, I can see the big 12. Beautiful. Keep it, pointing right at those numbers, looking perfect. The 737 was now less than a minute from touchdown, screaming through the air at an impossible speed. Becky could see the landing gear was down and locked. At least that system had continued to work after the hydraulic failure. But she could also see the main landing gear struts weren't aligned properly. The plane was going to hit the runway slightly sideways. Half a mile. Janet, get ready. When I say now, pull both power levers all the way back. I'm ready. Beautiful job, Janet. Your passengers are lucky to have you. The massive jet crossed the runway threshold, doing nearly 200 mph. Becky could see the runway rushing up to meet the aircraft's wheels. Now, Janet, power to idle. The engines wound down, but the plane was still flying much too fast. It floated above the runway for precious seconds, eating up thousands of feet of concrete. Becky watched in agonizing slow motion as the ground effect kept the heavy jet airborne longer than anyone wanted. Finally, with a tremendous bang that could be heard for miles, the 737's main landing gear slammed into the runway. The impact was so violent that sparks flew from the wheels, and for a terrifying moment, the plane bounced back into the air. Stay with it, Janet. It's going to bounce, but that's okay. The plane came down again, harder this time, and stayed down, but now it was racing down the runway at 150 miles per hour with no way to stop normally. Without hydraulics, Janet had no wheel brakes, no reverse thrust, no spoilers to help slow the massive jet. Becky, I can't stop it. Janet's voice was edged with panic as the end of the runway rushed toward them. You don't need to, there's plenty of runway left. But Becky could see what Janet couldn't. At this speed, even the longest runway wouldn't be enough. The 737 was going to roll off the end and into the grass, where it would likely break apart. That's when Becky made another split-second decision that would define the rest of her life. She pulled her F-16 directly in front of the airliner and lowered her landing gear. The jet wash from her military engines would create enormous drag on the 737, helping to slow it down, but it would also put her own aircraft and herself in mortal danger. What are you doing? Janet asked, seeing the fighter jet positioning itself just ahead of them. Helping you stop, Becky replied calmly, even as her own aircraft shuddered. From the turbulence created by having a massive airliner directly behind her, the technique worked. The combination of ground friction, air resistance, and the drag created by Becky's jet wash began to slow the 737, but they were running out of runway fast. Come on, Becky whispered to herself, watching the runway markers flash by. Come on, slow down. With less than 500 feet of concrete remaining, the big airliner finally rolled to a stop, its nose wheel just yards from the grass overrun area. For several seconds, nobody spoke. The only sound was the whine of jet engines winding down. Then, Janet's voice came over the radio, choked with emotion. We're stopped. We made it. Oh my God, we made it. The cheers erupted first from the air traffic control tower, then spread across the emergency crews on the ground. Fire trucks raced toward the stopped airliner, their crews ready to help evacuate 148 passengers and crew members who, just minutes before, had been facing almost certain death. Captain Martinez circled overhead, watching as emergency slides deployed from the 737 and people began evacuating. Every person who slid down those inflatable slides was alive because of what had just happened. Every family that would go home together tonight, every child who would hug their parents again. It was all because a flight attendant named Janet had refused to give up, and because Becky had refused to follow orders. American 447, this is San Antonio approached. The controller's voice was thick with emotion. Confirm all souls on board are safe. Yes, Janet replied, and her voice was stronger now, filled with the confidence of someone who had just accomplished the impossible. All 148 passengers and crew are safe. We have 2 unconscious pilots who need immediate medical attention, but everyone else is okay. As Becky finally turned toward Randolph Air Force Base, she knew her career was likely over. She'd disobeyed direct orders from her commanding officer. In the military, that was grounds for court-martial regardless of the outcome. She'd saved 148 lives, but she'd also defied the chain of command in the most public way possible. The flight back to base was the longest 20 minutes of her life. She tried not to think about the phone call she'd have to make to her mother, explaining why she was being kicked out of the military. She tried not to think about starting over at 32, looking for a new career as a pilot with a court-martial on her record, but she couldn't bring herself to regret her decision. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of those passengers pressed against the windows, saw Janet's determination as she fought to control an aircraft she'd never been trained to fly. Some things were more important than careers. That, as she landed at Randolph, Becky could see a crowd waiting on the flight line. Colonel Hayes stood with several other officers, their faces grim. This was it, the end of 15 years of military service. But as she climbed down from her aircraft, something unexpected happened. The ground crew began to applaud. Slowly, other personnel joined in. Within minutes, dozens of airmen and women were clapping, many of them with tears in their eyes. Master Sergeant Williams pushed through the crowd and grabbed Becky in a fierce hug. "You did it, girl. You actually did it." "Did what?" "Ended my career." "Are you kidding me?" Williams laughed. "You just became a national hero. Every news channel in the country is running your story. The president's office has already called. They want to give you a medal." Becky looked around, confused. Colonel Hayes was walking toward her, but his expression wasn't the angry scowl she'd expected. He looked humbled. "Captain Martinez," he said formally, "I owe you an apology, sir. I disobeyed a direct order. I understand the consequences." Hayes shook his head. "No, Captain. You followed a higher order, the one that says we protect those who cannot protect themselves. I was wrong to recall you from that emergency. I let my own prejudices cloud my judgment." He paused, looking uncomfortable but determined to continue. "I've spent the last hour reviewing your service record, really reviewing it, not just skimming through looking for reasons to deny your promotion. Your performance ratings are consistently outstanding. Your combat record is exemplary. And what you did today, He trailed off, shaking his head in amazement. Major Peterson stepped forward. "Captain, what you accomplished out there was extraordinary. I've been flying for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like it. You talked a civilian through landing a hydraulically disabled airliner that's going to be studied in flight schools for decades." Over the following days, the full story began to emerge. The American Airlines flight had suffered a catastrophic failure in its environmental control system, flooding the cockpit with carbon monoxide. Both pilots had been overcome within minutes of the malfunction. Without Captain Martinez's intervention, the plane would have crashed with no survivors. The investigation also revealed something else, something that would change everything. At Randolph Air Force Base, the base's own emergency response plan had failed miserably. While Becky was risking her career to save lives, the male pilots who'd spent years mocking her abilities had done nothing. Several had been in the air that day, close enough to help, but they'd followed Colonel Hayes's orders to stay clear of the emergency. The contrast was stark and embarrassing for the Air Force. Here was a woman they'd consistently undervalued, proving herself to be the most capable pilot in the sky when lives were on the line. 3 weeks later, Captain Rebecca Martinez was promoted to major in a ceremony attended by the Air Force Chief of Staff. But more importantly, she was given command of Randolph's new flight training program for emergency response procedures. Janet Wilson, the flight attendant who'd performed the miracle landing, was there for the ceremony. The two women had become close friends in the aftermath of their shared experience. "I keep thinking about what would have happened if you hadn't been there," Janet told Becky after the ceremony. "But I was there," Becky replied. "That's what matters." The real change, though, came in the attitudes of the people around her. Lieutenant Morrison, the pilot who'd made jokes about her reaching the pedals, approached her after the ceremony. "Major Martinez," he said, his voice formal and respectful, "I wanted to apologize for everything. What I said, what I thought. I was wrong about everything." Becky nodded, accepting his apology but not forgetting the years of disrespect. Change was possible, but it had to be earned, not just spoken. The base itself began to transform. More women started applying for pilot training positions. The harassment that had driven so many talented female officers away became unacceptable. Overnight, Master Sergeant Williams was promoted to First Sergeant and put in charge of implementing new respect and dignity policies. 6 months later, Major Martinez received a letter that meant more to her than all the medals and commendation. It was from a young woman named Lisa Thompson, a recent Air Force Academy graduate who'd requested assignment to Randolph specifically to train under Becky. "Major Martinez," the letter read, "I watched the news coverage of your emergency landing, and I knew I wanted to be the kind of pilot you are. Not because you're a woman, but because you showed what real courage looks like. Thank you for proving that the best pilot isn't always the loudest or the most arrogant. Sometimes it's the one who cares most about bringing everyone home safely." As Becky folded the letter, she thought about her mother's words from all those years ago. "Your job is to prove them wrong." She had proven them wrong, but more importantly, she'd proven something to herself. Her worth as a pilot, as a leader, and as a human being had never been dependent on their approval. It had always been there, waiting for the moment when it mattered most. The moment when 148 lives hung in the balance, and the woman they'd mocked became the person they all turned to for salvation. That was the day. Captain Rebecca Martinez stopped trying to earn their respect, and started commanding it instead.